Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Danielle Lund and I serve as Associate Director of Digital Engagement at the Alumnae Association of Mount Holyoke. Our work at the Alumnae Association is all about providing meaningful opportunities and resources for alums to connect with each other and Mount Holyoke College. Before we jump into today's session, I want to share that we're getting ready to launch a new platform just for the Mount Holyoke community, where alums can easily connect around shared interest and career. It's called The Gates, and we're going to be sending an email out about it later this week, so please keep an eye out for that. I want to share that registered for today's session are 90 community members, the majority being alums ranging from the classes of the 1960s up through the 2020s. If you feel comfortable doing so, I encourage you to drop your name in the chat box. You can find that feature at the bottom of your Zoom window. You can give your class year, your affinity to Mount Holyoke, just give a quick hello. Thanks so much for doing that. I want to briefly remind that we are recording the event and that no other recording is permitted. Should you have questions throughout the session, you can go ahead and drop those in the chat box, and we're going to raise throughout the event and try to cover as many as we can at closing as well. And so now I'm going to turn us over to our presentation. We're happy to have with us today professional artist Erin McGee Ferrell, an alum of the class of 1994, who currently teaches at the University of New England in Maine. So Erin, thank you so much for being with us. I'm now going to turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and I am so excited to be here. As a class of 1994, I was a studio art major and was recently back for Alumna Weekend 2 years ago, and the art studio building looks pretty much the same with a few changes here and there, but this still smells the same, which is great. So for all of you who took any sort of studio art class, welcome to this little touch of Mount Holyoke. I am a professional artist and educator. I live in Portland, Maine, and Zoom allows you to be with me today painting in my studio. So let me show you around. One added benefit is I was actually wrapping some presents today, and so I have some cool glitter on my face. I want you to know that I did not get all glitzed up for you, but it's sort of an added holiday bling. So anyway, okay, so let me give you a tour around my studio. What's going to be needed primarily for you today is a piece of paper and pencil to write down everything that you need for your beginning oil painting. Okay, so first of all, and I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit more, you are going to need brushes. Lots and lots of brushes, all shapes and sizes. You do not need this many brushes, but I had to show off my brush collection. Second of all, you are going to need paint. Lots and lots of types of paint. And then you need to put your paints in different color coordinated piles, because your paints will eventually look like this and you will not be able to tell what colors they are. Then you definitely need lots of light. Wherever you're painting, the more natural light you have, the better. That's something that is almost essential for good art, is natural light. Then sometimes it's fun to have a still life. In this case, I have a beautiful Lucian Day fabric, or it might be Orachili from Scotland. I love different fabrics. This I blinged out with some orange and some branches and some holiday lights. So it's always fun to have a still life. If you happen to have a big piece of glass, that makes a perfect painting palette. You can take an empty frame that you don't have any pictures in, and you can use the glass on that. It's always good to have an easel. You can have any kind of easel, from a collapsible one. I happen to have a big easel here that we're going to be doing demonstrations on. And most of all, you need a sense of humor. I like to tell people that when they are painting and when they're drawing, think of it as you're a musician, okay? And this is a little piece of advice for people that don't have a big background for the fine arts, but if I were to pick up the violin, and I absolutely have zero musical talent whatsoever, I would play the violin, and maybe after the first month of playing every day, I could possibly play Mary Had a Little Lamb so that someone could hear it. Maybe after 5 years of playing the violin, I could play something a little bit more, a little basic Mozart perhaps. But you have to remember that that learning how to draw and paint and creating what you want to say is a huge lifelong process of just trying and error and hours and hours and hours and hours of doing it, just like being a musician. So know that the process is just as fun as the product. And my main thing is to you, have fun, have a sense of humor, and enjoy the process. Often I will paint while I'm listening to an audiobook, or even just have a playlist, and it's really just puts me in a different place mentally. And I encourage everybody to have a passion, whether it's art or something comparable. Okay, so let's get started. I know one of the first questions that came in before I even started the material is, why oil versus acrylic? I need to let you know that I am an acrylic snob. I don't like acrylic paint. The difference is once you've tasted a really fabulous European Belgian truffle, you will no longer enjoy that Hershey's chocolate bar the same. So acrylic paint it's easy, it does the job, but it's plasticky. I know there are all sorts of new mediums that you can add to it to make it do fabulous things. But from my very biased opinion, acrylic is like a Hershey's chocolate bar. Oil paint is like European ganache truffles. So that's kind of my bias. If you are going to play with something other than oil paint, I definitely recommend watercolor. I always pair up watercolor and oil. They're two separate enough mediums to where they're really fun. And anyway, I encourage that partnership rather than acrylic paint. Okay, let's get started. Again, this is going to be a hard webinar to do while you're driving or something like that, because a lot of it is looking at my materials and making a list. So much of oil painting has to do, or at least this particular Zoom webinar has to do with the materials you need to have on hand to begin painting. If you are interested in further classes, please contact me. I do offer art classes and love to do that. So this little plug for that. Okay, let's start with our painting surfaces. So today I'm demonstrating on, this is basically just a primed canvas. This is very inexpensive. You can get them for super cheap depending on where you get them, just a basic primed canvas on stretchers. The second option is a primed canvas panel. It's basically primed canvas mounted on cardboard. That's a good practice. That's like your lowest low you want to get to. You could also prime a piece of cardboard, and that's also a pretty low. But so it depends on what you want to do and how much you want this little piece of art to outlive you by generations and generations. You might go on canvas versus on cardboard. Another thing you can do is you can buy canvas and mount it on a piece of wood. So I have a piece of canvas, primed canvas, that I mounted on a piece of masonite or any sort of wood. And then another option, and the last option, is just literally a piece of wood that's primed with no canvas involved. What's fun with all of these different surfaces is that they all feel different painting on. Painting on oil, painting on canvas versus linen. Linen is the creme de la creme of surface to paint on, but you only really paint on linen when you are doing super tiny details and you're going to work on something that has a very tight kind of fabric with maybe a portrait or something. I very rarely work on linen just because of the price primarily. Okay, let's talk about our palette. So we have our surface. Again, right now we're working oil on canvas. How are we going to mix our paints? What do we mix them on? already I talked about any kind of glass. Again, you have this old crappy 16 by 20-inch frame that no longer, it's got a bad poster in it. You can go to Goodwill and get all these frames. Basically, you want glass, a piece of glass that then you can tape around the edges, and that is a great palette to just have as a permanent palette.
Erin, we had a quick question about what kind of glue do you use to hold canvas to wood?
Great question. I love these. Bring them in. Okay, so what you want to use is there's a product called Gesso and also acrylic gel medium. So basically what you want to do to prime your canvas is it's a white primer called Gesso, and you get that at an art store. A very cheap version of it would be just going to the hardware store and getting acrylic primer, like drywall primer. But the thing about I've had that crack on me before, so Gesso is like fabulous. You can basically use that Gesso to adhere your canvas onto the wood. I would use that first. You could also use something called acrylic gel medium, which is kind of like a clear gluish stuff. But I think for this product, I would just get a tub of Gesso. And you can also get clear Gesso, white Gesso, and black Gesso. I've never used black Gesso, but I generally do white. So, but that's a great question.
And then a quick follow-up to that. What does primed mean?
Thank you. Great questions. I love you guys. Okay, this is so much fun. Okay, so basically what happens is oil paint, right? Here's oil paint. Oil paint is it's color, it's pigment, it's minerals, it's everything that makes up the color suspended in linseed oil. Okay, and in order to make this less like toothpaste or frosting, I have to dissolve it a little bit. I have to thin it with turpentine or some sort of a solvent like that to thin it. Between the linseed oil and the thinner, that will eat my my fabric over the time being. It'll eat paper, it'll eat cardboard, it'll eat fabric. I would assume you need a primer on wood also because it'll soak into the wood because wood is porous. So what the primer or the Gesso does is it's the layer that the canvas and that the paint sits on, so it does not eat into its surface. And so it basically, it's a barrier that separates the painting from its surface for a long time. And it also helps it stay. It helps it stick better to it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Is that good? Okay, so getting back to palettes, again, you can have a glass palette, which is super fun. One that I usually commonly use because 100% less cleanup and it's good for painting in plein air, which is outside, is it's a paper palette. Basically, you can do the same thing by taking parchment paper or by taking wax paper and putting it on a cookie sheet. This happens to be a paper palette, so I can, every time I use it and mix colors, I can literally rip this off. I also find this at the art store. The reason why it's gray, and gray is a good color to have for a paper palette, is because you will find that when you mix your colors, you get a better sense of the colors on gray versus on white or any other surface. So to add to that real fast, if I did take that piece of glass out of that frame, I might consider painting the piece of paper underneath the glass gray so that I would have a piece of gray paper and then my glass. I saw a question come in, Daniel. Any other questions?
Nope, just comments. Yeah.
Okay, and one more thing too that's super cool about using this paper palette is, I don't know if you know this, but oil paint is super expensive. I'm sorry, people, but it is. So what you can do is, say like I've mixed 5 or 6 colors on here, and I know that I'm not going to get to my painting till next Saturday or whatever, a week from now. I literally just take this palette and I can put it in my freezer. Okay, or I can take this piece of paper, if I have a small freezer, and say like my paint is right here on this side, I can fold it, I can fold it again and force, and I can put it in a plastic bag and stick it in my freezer. So that's how you prevent your paint from drying up between your sessions, and it can last in your freezer for like a year. So if you get really excited after this and you buy $1 million worth of oil paint supplies and you start a painting and then you give it up for a year and then you take it out next year, it's all good. So let's move on now to brushes. So we have our surface, we have our palette. Okay, brushes. As you can tell, I love brushes. I've never had my food smell from it because it's in the freezer, maybe refrigerator, but plus oil paint doesn't really smell. I mean, the solvents. So here, I'm going to jump around again. I apologize because I'm a process thinker. But another big thing about acrylic versus oil, the primary difference between acrylic versus oil is that acrylic is a water-based medium. So you just mix it with water. And again, it's got some plasticity to it. So it's kind of that plastic watery feeling. Oil is pigment suspended in linseed oil. So again, linseed oil has a little bit of odor to it, as well as the solvent. I use a solvent which does not smell. It's called Gamsol. It's by Gamblin, and it's the best solvent I know on the market. A lot of times people will use odorless Turp or whatever. This is the best, least toxic product to use. And so anyway, I recommend Gamsol, as well as I know it's always good to have some sort of ventilation when you paint. I know Mount Holyoke actually has a ventilation system that lifts it up, and it's a very sophisticated one. I just make sure that I have my windows cracked. In Maine, I do painting primarily outside whenever I can, but obviously this time of year, as long as I have the windows cracked and maybe a ceiling fan on, I'm not too worried about it. There's also water-soluble oil paints. I have to let you know that I do not know much about those, and I am not an expert in water-soluble oil paints, so I cannot answer questions related to that. Okay, let me get back to brushes. So brushes are your best friend. If you do not have good brushes, you cannot paint well. Brushes do not need to be expensive. I have a large quantity of brushes, as you have seen. I have a lot of these, I call them my crappy brushes from Walmart. You can get these really cheap brushes from Walmart for like $3 a pack, and I have hundreds of these. Basically, you need these for tiny little details, as well as blending, and basically you will throw these away all the time. That's why you do not want to spend money on these. I also have lots and lots of this sort of brushes. These are great, $5 from a hardware store. Get them at all different sizes, colors, textures. This size of brush, if you were to get this kind of a head of a brush at an art store, you would be talking like $75 versus a hardware store, which is $5. So I definitely recommend using hardware stores. You will want to invest in some good quality brushes from the art store. There are primarily 3 separate sizes, or 3 different styles. This is called a flat. Let me try to get this out because it's flat. Or yeah, okay, this is called a round because it's round. This is very easy, you guys. See how easy this is. Okay, and then you have filberts. Filberts look like fingernails, okay? And then occasionally you have a fan brush. Okay, now people, except for Bob Ross, I have never used a fan brush in my life. I'm a professional artist. I've been painting for over 30 years. I have never used a fan brush. If anybody says you need a fan brush, you do not need to believe them. So throw the fan brush out. Okay. So these are my favorite. And of these 3, the brights, the rounds, and the filberts, I generally don't ever use a filbert. So in my opinion, you just need a bunch of different kinds of rounds and a bunch of different types of flats. Okay, but these are this is my biased opinion. See, I have all these different flats. Okay. Now, you ask, why are the brushes long? Watercolor brushes are short-handled. Oil painting brushes are long-handled. Does anybody know why? Okay, well, I'll tell you why. Okay, the whole point of being an artist, and especially an oil painter, is that you put your whole body into this. Okay, I'm going to stand up and demonstrate. So if I'm painting like this on a surface, this is not very exciting, okay? Artists are known to be passionate, and we put our whole souls and bodies into our painting. So I want to be able to take this really long brush and lean over and think about fabulous things and look and reach really high on big canvases. And so this long brush is an extension of my soul. Okay, that's basically why they're long. And in honesty, you can actually it does actually give more looseness to your painting, and I think there is a purpose to it. So I really that's why long brushes for all of your initial stuff. You want to stand back. So if I'm painting, I'll paint something and I'll stand back and look at it. I'll paint something, I'll stand back and look at it. It's much easier to do this with a long brush versus this little tiny brush, and you get really super micro into it and it all falls apart. Okay, so that's brushes. The other thing we have are palette knives. Okay, so this is your basic palette knife. It comes in lots of different shapes and sizes. You can get them like this. You can get them like this. You can get them super huge like this. And the ones you do not want to get, people, are plastic palette knives. These will break within the first hour, and they serve no point unless you want to put them in your kitchen and spread butter on your toast. That's a good reason for plastic palette knives. Why do you need a palette knife? Okay, well, a lot of people paint with palette knives rather than with brushes. That's an option. And that's fun. It's fun to explore both painting directly with a palette knife and a brush. The primary reason to paint with a palette knife is for color mixing. If I were to take two pieces of paint, and I'll show you, and I take a brush and okay, here's an analogy. I have chocolate and vanilla frosting, okay? And I take a brush because I want to mix them together to this like light brown vanilla-y chocolatey frosting, right? If I take a brush and I swirl and swirl and swirl, 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 number one, my brush is going to be fully caked with chocolate and vanilla stuff, versus if I take a palette knife and I can mix and mix and mix chocolate and vanilla frosting together till it's this perfect consistent mass of chocolatey vanilla light brown frosting. Same thing with oil paint. So I will show you and basically when we do a color mixing demonstration, the benefits of mixing with a palette knife versus a brush. Any questions? You good?
We're good for the moment.
Okay. Okay, your next best friend are your paints. So I'm introducing to you guys. Yeah.
Lennon, do you ever make your paints from scratch?
Absolutely not. I'm sure you can. And if I were living in Iceland in a cabin and had a huge grant and had no art stores and no Amazon near me, and if I was super bored, I could, but I have an art store within 2 minutes of me, so why would I? Okay, but yeah, I'm sure it's fun, and actually I do love chemistry. I love that idea of pigments, but I prefer color mixing. And so anyway, let me tell you a little bit about colors and pigments. There are a billion types of brands of oil paint, and there are a billion types of colors. One oil painting tube can cost $68 for a small tube. It just depends on how difficult it is to obtain that mineral or that pigment to make that color. For instance, this is titanium white. I always get it in the super big tubes. basically, you can buy any brand of titanium white and it will not make a difference. So if you buy the top brand of, this is, so my favorite one's Gamblin. That's sort of one of the more expensive. Gamblin, Old Holland, Williamsburg. Those are like this high range paints. The cheaper ones are like Dick Blick brand, or this is I guess Winsor Newton is more of a cheaper brand. It doesn't matter which white paint you buy. All white paints are pretty much the same. So you can get your cheapest white paint anywhere. Do not buy expensive white paint. Okay, but white paint, this is titanium white. There's titanium white, there's zinc white, there's lead white. There's all sorts of fun whites out there. And so you need a basic white. Okay, but we're doing a limited palette color here, which means that basically when you use fewer colors to start off with, your painting will look better if you're a beginner, because color and color theory it's a whole different science. So I encourage you guys just to work with very limited colors when you're starting out your painting, because then it'll always look good. You won't have to worry about color theory, because once you start adding in a billion colors, I can guarantee it's probably going to always look bad for a while. So if you want to impress everybody, use the fewer colors and it's going to look good for longer until you kind of like get your grip on stuff. Okay, so the colors I'm using today are titanium white. I am using burnt sienna. And again, these are all called earth colors. You should not spend a lot of money on earth colors. Earth colors are cheap and they're basically consistent throughout. They're made of like clay and mud and very easily accessible things. Where you want to spend your money is on your blues and on some of your yellows and your reds. That's where the quality of the paint really counts, but earth colors, it doesn't. So I have titanium white, burnt sienna. I have raw umber, which is another earth color. I have ivory black. This is really cool. Sorry, I'm bringing in all these tidbits. Ivory black, if you look in the ingredients, it's made of burnt up animal bones. I think that's kind of cool, because it used to be ivory, but now it's not. So it's just charred animal bones make that black color. I've got high schoolers and we like to look at these ingredients and see how kind of interesting they are. Yellow ochre, you can see this. See, it's a yellow ochre. Anyway, your paints will look like this too. And I don't know what this one is. I didn't mean to have that. So, blue. I've got sorry, this is embarrassing. Where's my blue? I guess that was ultramarine blue. So ultramarine blue, raw umber, ivory black, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and titanium white. You should have 6 colors in front of you. So the only expensive color is this of the bunch is ultramarine blue.
Do you know if you can get vegan versions of the black color?
That's a great question. And you do not need to get ivory black. You can get chromatic black. You can get a billion other types of black. So don't worry about ivory black.
And recognizing we're in kind of the colors mode right now, we did have a question come through about stretching your own canvases, or is that not really worth it? No,
stretching your own, thank you. That's a great question. Stretching your own canvases is the very best way to build a canvas. That's a whole different class into itself, and we actually learned to stretch canvas at Mount Holyoke. All of my canvases that I stretch, I feel like should be twice as expensive in terms of the final painting. I mean, like in terms of me selling them, because it takes 3 days to stretch a canvas so for instance, in the springtime when the weather's warm up here in Maine, I will spend a couple of weeks just stretching canvases. When you stretch a canvas, number one, the quality of your canvas is better, as well as when you want to take your canvas off and on. So for instance, this painting right here is a 6 foot by 6 foot painting behind me. This is on a canvas. Did I stretch it? Yes, so I stretched this canvas. I had to feel the side of it, which means that if one of you guys wants to buy this painting, just say, and I wanted to ship it to you, because I stretched this canvas myself, then that means that it's very easy for me to unstretch it, roll it up, put the stretcher bars with it, ship it to you to Timbuktu, and then you unstretch it and restretch it. Versus if I bought this 6 foot canvas, 6 by 6 foot canvas at an art store, because it's a little bit less quality in terms of the process, it's not as easy, or I feel like it doesn't have the, I mean, like, here, I had to try. I know that this canvas will last generations and generations and generations. I feel like it's always better quality when you stretch and prime your own canvas.
Awesome. Thank you. Super enlightening.
Yeah. But that's a different webinar. Okay. Okay. So we are getting on to, also we've got our paints, we've got our brushes, we have our palette, we have our surface. Now we need our rags. Okay. This sounds super funny, but you need a lot of rags and paper towels when you paint and when you do oil painting. So my favorite form of paper towel is Viva. Viva is the paper towel of the artist's choice. Now, because of the pandemic, it's actually really hard to get Viva. But if you do, you want to have Viva paper towels. They're super thick, and no, I'm not a spokesperson for Viva. I do not get any money for this, but you want Viva paper towels. The other thing which I discovered a few years ago is at your local hardware store, you can get these boxes of cloth-like rags. Basically, they're kind of like Viva paper towels, are not quite as good, but they come in a huge, big bucket. And with the pandemic, I've actually been using these a lot better, a lot more. Okay. The other thing, or like, again, you can kind of just get a bag of rags. These are just cut up t-shirts, and I cut them in little strips. But the very best thing to have, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have around your house, are socks. Mismatched socks that come out of your dryer that no one knows who they came from, and you can't ever figure out what happened and why this sock doesn't match this sock, and you have all these socks. These are the very best things you can paint with, because you stick your hand into them and you can paint with your finger or 2 fingers, or you just get a lot of control. So start collecting your socks. Encourage your kids to lose their socks, and then start your own sock pile.
Awesome.
Okay.
Question,
yeah.
Were you calling the blue ultramarine blue?
Yes. So again, there's a billion forms of blue. Ultramarine blue is like the standard blue. That was the blue that we learned at Mount Holyoke with. Ultramarine blue is like protocol blue. You start with that one. And ultramarine blue with white, and I'll show you, makes my very, very favorite color in the world, which is Alice in Wonderland dress blue. So I'll show you that. That's literally my favorite color in the world. Okay, so the other thing, just throw in a couple things here too. Rubber gloves, vinyl gloves, whatever kind of gloves you have. You want to have gloves because we talked about all of the paints being compounds or elements, whatever, suspended in linseed oil. What does linseed oil do? It absorbs into your skin. And you do not want lead white, titanium white, zinc white, cobalt blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium yellow. You do not want that soaking into your skin. I always wear gloves when I paint. This is essential. The other fun thing to have is a huge toothpaste squeezer. So when you have all of your fabulous tubes of paint, you stick it in and you can squeeze it out so that you are not wasting 1 drop of your expensive oil paint. And the other thing you need is, I think I'm all done with these. See, this is so material heavy. I really apologize. You need jars with lids. Okay, let me go explain your solvents. Again, I talked about Gamsol. This is, again, a turpentine substitute. It is clear, right? See, it's clear like water. Now, once you start painting with it, it gets gray and murky, right? This is fabulous, though, because as I paint with it, it gets gray and murky, right? But watch this. I put it all in a jar with a lid on it, and I forget about it in my garage. And watch. 2 months later, I can take it after I haven't moved it, and I pour off the top, and it's pretty clear again. See this? So like this And you can see the sediment. Wait, I'm going to try to angle it. So the sediment in there, that's all the oil paint yucky sediment that's stuck in that jar. So basically, once you buy a bottle of this, you recycle it over and over and over again, just through a process of letting it sit in jars. Okay. Okay, so now we have our Gamsol, and let's get started. Let's mix some colors. I'm going to turn this. And you know what, for some people, if you're like me, I love watching color being mixed. It's kind of crazy, but something about mixing color. You know how some people have those fake fireplaces on their TV sets? I could literally have some sort of app or something on my TV set that just has people mixing color all day. It's pretty strange, but okay. So here is my white. Can you see this, Danielle? You got it?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, now, so look, I have put each one, I want you to see how efficient I am. I pre-squeezed paint onto one of my palettes, right? And I use my palette knife to scrape it up, like again, a glob of toothpaste or frosting. And I just put it on this palette, and I have a tiny, tiny little dab of Ultramarine Blue. I am going to mix for you guys my favorite color. Ready? This is Alice in Wonderland Blue. Think about all the children's illustrations of Alice in Wonderland's blue dress, or go look for it. And I want you to see how I'm using this palette knife. I'm not being gentle. I'm literally scraping it and squishing it. And this is what you need to do to mix oils. Okay, so here is Alice in Wonderland Blue. Can you see it? Can you see the color?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, if I had done that with a brush, my brush would be totally gunked up right now, and we do not want to do that. So I'm putting that beautiful color, I scrape it and I put it on the edge of my, I think you can see this. Yeah, I put it over here on the edge of my canvas. Now, let me show you this other fabulous color that I love. I make a beautiful green out of, okay, here, I'm going to back up. I'm sorry, process thinker here. So what are the three primary colors in life? You learned this in kindergarten. You're right, red, yellow, and blue. You guys are so smart. Okay. So with the limited palette, remember, using these limited colors, all of your paintings are going to look fabulous and successful, okay? Instead of red, we're using burnt sienna. Instead of yellow, we're using yellow ochre. And I do have some blue here, but I could use black. Black actually acts like a blue, and I'll show you how this works. Okay, so I'm going to clean off my palette knife, and I do that with my paper towel, right? So just clean it off by scraping it. So there, I have a clean palette knife. Now watch this. If I mix a tiny bit of black, and see how tiny that is, a tiny bit of yellow and some white, I am going to get a beautiful green. Mixing black, mixing ivory black, or actually any sort of black, and mixing yellow ochre, I am going to get a beautiful sage green. I'll show you. And with no blue, because we know that when you mix blue and yellow, it gets green. But when you have a black substitute, sorry, I'm going to add some more black. See, this is part of the mixing process, as you play and play and play. Squeeze some more white point paint on here.
As you're doing this, do you prefer to buy black or mix your own black?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I always buy black because, again, it's a day and age where you can buy a million different kinds of black. But that's another good question. You can mix your own black using brown and blue, and I will show you that too. Basically, it's fun to use lots and types of blacks and lots of types of whites. And if you want to get super, so hang on, this is supposed to be my fabulous color that I'm demonstrating to you, and it is not working out. So that's very embarrassing.
Well, part of the process, I'd say.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, so I have a black, and because I can't read my my tube, right?
Ah,
I think this is ivory black, but it could be Payne's gray, which would change the color, which means that you guys are just going to have to believe me that when you mix black and yellow, it gets to be this beautiful green. But because it's not working, and this is very embarrassing, I think it might be Payne's gray because I can't read my tube of paint. So, okay, so we'll just pretend like that's a beautiful shade of green. Yes.
Question come in. Do you ever leave it streaky so that it creates an effect on the canvas that's a little bit different, or?
No. So that's actually a great question. And the reason you don't, well, I mean, you can explore and do whatever you want to, again, because this is play and play and play and have fun. But generally, as a rule of thumb, I am thinking about a color and I'm applying that color I want on the canvas. So I want it to look like the color. I don't want it to look streaky. I don't know, you know what? I don't have a great answer for that, but I know that you don't. But I guess you could. I guess just in the traditional theory, you don't. Okay, so let me do one more thing. I love that question about do you make your own black, because it is super easy to do. And actually, sometimes I do. So let me put this horrible, not looking green color over there, which is my embarrassment of the day. And I'm going to make my own black, which is Ultramarine Blue and Burnt Sienna.
And we just got a note that's a Bob Ross thing to leave it streaky.
Oh, forget it. Okay, you know what? There's a lot of things about Bob Ross which I admire. But I have not, you know, maybe I should watch more of him. I don't know. I haven't. Okay, so this is basically your own black using Burnt Sienna and Ultramarine Blue. But just look how cool this is. Isn't this nice? You can just make a billion colors using this very limited palette. And again, everybody's going to be like, wow. Okay, let's start painting. Okay, now the other couple things I want to introduce to you, or actually the one thing I want, this right here. You need a little thing to put your solvent in. So again, I have a jar, right? I just need a little tiny bit of my solvent, and then I'm going to put the lid back on my jar because I don't really want the fumes getting into my studio. Remember, I want to limit my fumes. So I just have a little jar of what I need. And again, put this over here. The other thing that I want is charcoal. Okay, this is an artist's trick to doing a billion things. You want vine charcoal. Vine charcoal can come in little packs like this, and it's super lightweight and it's very soft. This is different than compressed charcoal. Compressed charcoal are those little bars that you get in drawing class. It's very super dense. They're kind of heavy and look like rectangular cubes. Vine charcoal looks like little vines and twigs. Okay, now the secret to vine charcoal is this. So let's look at my canvas. And here we go. I have this kind of plant thing here. It's kind of like a pussy willow plant. I'm going to basically very quickly, and not even really looking too much, I'm drawing this, and it also, the charcoal breaks all the time. So I'm drawing this plant right here. La 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 la. Okay, here is my plant. Now, if I have charcoal, basically what I can do is I can take my paint and I can paint and use the charcoal as like, I can mix my paint into my charcoal as I paint. Okay, let me see how close I can get this to you so you can see how this works. I want you to know I have paint all over my laptop. That's just how it is. Okay, so here's my Alice in Wonderland blue. Now watch, if I want to, say like I'm making these little pussy willow things. If I paint, and look, it's dripping, but I'm mixing my charcoal as I paint, I instantly have, it looks like I've done a lot of shading on here. Okay, I'm gonna try to do, look how cool that is. It looks like I might have mixed like 3 different colors of this blue when all I've done is blended wet paint into charcoal. And one more, I'll try one more effect showing this with my bigger brush. Using this non-greeny green, which is actually a pretty color.
Erin, can you just raise the camera a little bit so that we can
Sure. Yes. So again, look, I could do this whole painting just having drawn it with charcoal and using these colors, kind of mixing and blending into my charcoal. See how beautiful that is? Okay, maybe here I'll show it up closer. Okay, so see, especially the blue on the kind of Pussy-Willow things, it's just one blue, but because I mixed it into the charcoal, it looks like it actually has some shadow and some tone to it. Okay, so that's one trick. The second thing that we can do to begin a painting is, this is called the Wipeout Method. This is where your socks are your best friends. So I'm gonna take my fabulous athletic socks, put it on my hand over my glove. No, it's all drippy. Thank you. I saw that question. Did my, all I did, great question. And thank you, I forgot about that. So so I took my brush, I put it in my beautiful paint, and I went like this, and I then dipped my brush in my turpentine jar. And that's why it's all drippy. So I guess because it's an underpainting, it's the first layer, I want it kind of smooth and real thin. And then as I layer and layer, then I add less and less turpentine to my brush. But the very first layer, it's pretty drippy, and that's a good question. I just kind of didn't even think about that. Okay, this next one is the most fun. It's called the Wipeout Method. So put your sock on your glove right here. Take a huge swat of your raw umber paint. And look, I'm adding lots and lots of turpentine to this. And I am just making a huge muddy mess of raw umber with my sock. A lot of times, if you've taken a charcoal drawing class, this is the same thing, where you will put charcoal all over your paper, and then you will use an eraser to actually wipe out your drawing. Okay, so here I have my, here's my composition. It's all a raw umber background. Okay, now here's my sock, right? I'm gonna switch to a clean part of the sock, and with my finger, I'm not gonna use brushes for a while. With my finger, I'm going to dip my finger in the turpentine, and I am going to draw my branches. Again, I use my fingernail. I'll use my finger. I'll switch my sock around to different places. And this is fun. And a lot of times, you guys, I highly recommend, and for some of my students, sometimes the brush can be an intimidating factor. So oftentimes it's fun to actually do your painting with your fingers first, because I don't know what it is, but psychologically, when you take the brush factor out and you're literally just like here's two fingers, I can go like this and add a really interesting background to it. Or again, with the clean part and just my fingernail, I can add tiny, tiny little details. So then what I would do in this case, this is called the wipeout, I would just let this dry. And after this is dried, then I would start painting the colors on it. Or while it's wet, again, I'll grab my fabulous blue here and this unsuccessful green. But see, you have to see it's not going to be as good because it's going to just blend into, see, it's not going to do what I want it to do. It's just kind of, I don't know. I encourage, if you do the wipeout method, to let it dry completely before then you try to put a different layer on it. Okay, so now we are going to leave this to some time for question and answer, but this is the most important part, is washing your brushes. How do you clean up this mess? And again, I want you to notice that my Mount Holyoke sweatshirt, which I've had for a billion years, see, this is my #1 go-to painting sweatshirt. You definitely want your own bin for oil painting clothes because none of your clothes will be the same after you really get into it. So how do I clean this up? So I talked already about this. I could finish painting something, or I could fold it up and put it in the freezer till I'm ready. Again, the same thing with this. These are all beautiful brand new colors. I just fold them up and put in the freezer. Or again, if you have a cookie sheet and wax paper or parchment paper, it acts as the exact same thing as this. So you don't have to buy this stuff if you don't want to. With your palette knife, so these socks, unfortunately, you have to throw away. Anything that has the turpentine and stuff on it, you just have to throw away. Where's my palette knife? Oh, here it is. Okay, so the palette knife, what you do is you take your paper towels and you just simply wipe it off like this. You want to make sure that your palette knife is always super clean. Your palette knife is your best friend. Now with your brushes, cleaning your brushes is actually an art. And it took me years and years to try to figure out, it's just like your brushes you invest in, your brushes need to be your priority. Okay. So the first thing, so I have these 2 gunky brushes that I've used. The first thing that I'm going to do is take, again, paper towels. You use a billion paper towels, unfortunately. And I am wiping as best as I can all of the paint from it, just paper towel, just wiping it all off. Okay. The next step is I literally put it in my jar of turpentine and I just squish it all around. Okay, and I press it. You do not need to be super gentle with your brushes. If they're good quality, they're meant to be squished and pressed around. Okay, and then again, I'll take a clean paper towel and wipe them off. And see, clean brushes. Now, maybe if they're super, super dirty or something, and they've got, maybe if they have some other stuff on them, then what I'll do is I'll take some Ajax or the cheapest stuff, Joy, Ajax, whatever says like, don't use natural, bio, anything. You just like the cheapest stuff you can, that's degreaser. And I'll put this in a fresh jar. I'll just put a couple of, like a, half an inch in there. And then I'll take my brushes, brush them around in the liquid detergent, and then just rinse them off and wipe them off again. I don't have to do that all the time. I just do that on occasion if I'm having a hard time getting them clean.
Awesome.
Okay.
I see a couple of questions here. So
yeah.
Give me tips for how to get started if you don't have great ventilation. Is it just to go outside, or any other ideas on?
Yeah. Great question. Go outside. If you have a garage, you want to have some sort of ventilation. Again, with Gamsol, which is again a fairly, it's not healthy, but you know what I mean. It's the least of all evils. I feel like you can paint for like an hour or so. I don't know that. That's a good question, because I don't want to. There is some odor involved. I would say,
I'm curious, like,
I don't know, even just a cracked open window. I feel like that if you need some sort of a cracked open window, I would not recommend doing oil painting in a closed room. I just wouldn't do it.
Thank you. How long does it take for the canvas to dry between painting layers?
That is a great question. Okay, it really depends on the color you use. For instance, if you have white in it, it'll take forever. Maybe like a week. If it's only raw umber like this will be ready tomorrow. And so if earth colors, burnt sienna, raw umber, yellow ochre, mixed with quite a bit of the turpentine will dry within 24 hours. This white, because I put this patch of white and light blue, this now is going to take probably about a week to dry.
Okay.
If I hadn't have put that white on, it would be ready for me to dry tomorrow. It would be ready for me to paint tomorrow. But there's also a lot of other mediums you can use to add to your oil paint that increase the drying time. Gamblin makes something called Galkid, and that's something that you add to your oil paint before you paint, and it increases the drying time as well as makes it kind of shiny. So there's a billion different products to increase your drying time.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. What kind of hair is used in paintbrushes? Is one type better than the other?
That is I am so glad you asked that question. That's a fabulous question. Okay, this is boar's hair. This kind of looks like pig. It literally comes boar's hair, okay? Boar's hair is good because it's very super stiff. You really only use boar's hair stiff brushes with acrylic or oil painting, okay? This is synthetic hair, which I love. It's not boar's hair. It's very soft and it's plastic. It's synthetic. And they make two different marks. This makes a different mark than this makes. So it's important to have both kinds, boar's hair and synthetic. What you use for watercolor is sable. Again, you can get synthetic sable, but very, very soft. And occasionally, so this is not real sable, this is synthetic, but just soft, soft, soft is what you use for watercolor. Though, if you are working on really fine details in an oil paint, again, I will use very, very soft. And again, this is a synthetic round. So synthetic is wonderful. I think you can go to synthetic all the way for everything, except for occasionally it's very helpful to have some very stiff bristles of boar's hair. Though this is a paintbrush from Ace Hardware and it's super thick, and I don't think they use boar's hair for this. So there must be a synthetic stiffer kind of hair too.
Awesome. So we have more questions coming in, which I want to get to in just a second. I want to be sure to share out. I'm dropping in the chat right now Erin's artist website and a list that she is sharing with us at Dick Blick for supplies that you can get. So I'm just going to pop those in the chat right now. I'm also going to share that information on our main screen here. But we're going to continue to answer as many questions as we can in the next few minutes. And really, thank you all for the great questions, the great comments. Super terrific, Erin, for sharing all your expertise. We so appreciate it. So let me get right back to the questions here. Can I use a tabletop easel, or do I need a standing one for starters, do you think?
You could prop something up on a tree. It just depends how big you want to go, you know. And so in my list I put 16 by 20 inch canvas. I think that and you can get, again, like, I'm not a spokesperson for Dick Blick or anything, but you can generally get a pack of like 5. I would get a pack of like 5 16 by 20 inch canvases. Number one, if you just get one and it's really expensive, you're going to be afraid to do anything on it. You're going like, I just paid $30, blah, blah, blah. So you want to get 5 16 by 20 inch cheap canvases so that you can like paint on them all at the same time, and they can be drying, and you can be repainting them, and you can be layering. And it's about like, do not be paralyzed by this process. Often I will paint a painting, 2 years later be like, I don't like it anymore, and I'll paint on top of it. So you need to let yourself play with this process. So buy not too big, not too small, 16 by 20 inches, great, and buy several of them, and you can do several of them at one time.
Awesome. What do you think about water mixable oils?
I can't answer that question. Yeah, I don't know it. I know that they exist. Right. I have not. I've never used them.
Okay, cool.
And that might be a great solution to the person who asked about no ventilation.
Okay.
But I am not. I don't know. I can't answer that. Sorry.
That's a possibility. And then how to get rid of the dregs of Gamsol and Turpentine? Can you use Gamsol to clean brushes, or must you use Turpentine?
I only use Gamsol because if I start using 2 different solvents, I will inevitably mix them up at some point. You know, you could I just don't, I mean, because Gamsol exists, I just don't fool around with Turpentine anymore. I guess because it's a safer product to work with. I just don't, you know, I'm sure you could clean your brushes with turpentine. I usually clean my brushes inside, and I store a jar of old Gamsol like underneath my sink, and I just don't want to mix up the two. So
Cool.
yeah.
A question about your studio space. What are those color dots and squares behind your easel?
I love you guys. Come visit my studio. Okay, so this is basically color studies. Because there's so many colors, what I do is, like, for instance, I make color charts. So for instance, this is using what happens when I mix flake white and Mars black, titanium white and perylene black, Flemish white and black spinel, unbleached titanium white and chromatic black. Basically, if I am thinking of a color, then I can look at the color and say, oh, how did I make that? And basically, it's a chart to remind me how to mix my colors.
Awesome, awesome. And then we had a question come through about any septic concerns with cleaning.
Yeah, so you don't want anything to go down your drains. That's why, again, when I am, you don't want anything in your drains. Basically, I'll take, again, here's my brush, here's my turpentine. I'll dip it in there, I'll clean it off. I'll then wipe it on the paper towel. And then I'll put a lid on it and just let it sit. Then again, the only thing goes down the drain is if I put the brush and mix it with Joy or Dawn dishwashing soap, and then I'll, you know, put that down the drain. But you don't let anything go down your drain other than water and soap.
Awesome. And Erin, so we have a couple more questions here if you're open to answer.
Sure,
you have
sure.
a moment to stay on. They're great. So a novice here, when you were painting and it started dripping, you didn't even blink an eye. Can you talk a little bit more about how do you fix, quote, mistakes like that, and what is involved in painting over a painting?
Oh, I love this. Okay. Well, first of all, you have to say that there's no mistakes, because the wonderful thing about oil painting is it's about layering, 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 layering. So if I create one painting and then let it dry, and then I can put a whole new painting on top of it and let it dry, or I can you can't make mistakes because you can constantly layer on top of it. You literally cannot make mistakes oil painting. Or if you feel like you've got too much paint, you just wipe it out or scrape it out or sand it off. Or you can't make mistakes. And sometimes some of the things that I'm like, oh no, they ended up being some of the best part of the painting.
So, and I think, you know, in the vein of this concept, would you usually do sketches in a sketchbook first, or do you always work straight onto the canvas? Onto the canvas? Yeah,
that's a great idea. If I was a perfect student and also brushed my teeth and flossed, if I flossed my teeth every night, I would do sketches in a sketchbook. But I love sketchbooks just for the fact that sketchbooks are diaries. If you have a journal or a sketchbook, it's literally a diary of your life, and it's a great place. So ideally, yes, you would have a sketchbook and sketch in it every day. To be honest, like, again, I can't floss my teeth every night, so I don't. I don't really sketch before I paint. I just literally sketch onto the canvas. But again, ideally, you're supposed to. I don't.
And then, how do you know when a painting is done?
Ah, that's a great question. That just takes being a master painter. I don't know how to describe it. You just know. You have to. That, I think, is. I guess here's my opportunity to have a little platform. Artists, I feel, in our society aren't taken very seriously, and they're not paid very well. And there is mastery that comes to a career of 30 years in it. And part of that mastery and part of that intelligence, that visual intelligence, is just knowing when it's done. So it's how do you, if you're a composer for music, how do you know when it's done? If you're a poet, how do you know when it's done? It just takes years and years of doing it until you know when it's done. So I don't have an answer for that.
Thank you. I think that's a good place to close out for today. This has been really terrific, and to all those who are on, we so appreciate the questions, the good comments. I'm gonna drop So it dropped Erin's contact detail into the chat box. It's up on the screen right now. I'm also going to put in the chat a link to where we post recordings of our webinars in case you wanted to revisit some of today's content. That's also where we have our upcoming events posted. And like I said, keep an eye on your email in the next few days. We're getting ready to launch The Gates, which is a brand new online space where alums can easily connect around interests and career. There's already a fine arts group set up in that space. So really, please keep your eyes open for that message. And we look forward to connecting with you again down the road for different events. Erin, thank you again so much for being with us. And we're wishing everybody a great day.
Thank you. I love you guys. Keep painting.